Well, hello, welcome. You're here with John and Mary Rector. We are with Rector Professional Coaching. Today, we just want to record this video and talk a little bit about one of the services we offer as disaster relief and recovery coaching. So there's a lot in there. Some of you saw our other video, What is Coaching? So if you're not
Mhm.
sure about that, I recommend you go back and look at that video on our YouTube channel or go look on our website. But yeah, I just want to spend about 20 or 30 minutes so having this conversation about what is this. Uh, since we're going through the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, it's really got a lot of people shut down and trying to be innovative and do things a lot differently. But uh, the purpose of this video is to talk a little bit about what is this coaching and also to help people who kind of are just overwhelmed. They just don't know.
Mhm.
And this isn't just COVID-19. This is tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, fires, any of those things that disrupt our life.
John, people don't realize because it hasn't really been covered. We've had two natural disasters in the midst of all this COVID-19. We had, first of all, the tornadoes that went through Nashville and people affected in the Nashville area because of the tornadoes. And that was reported, but then the COVID-19 came in and really completely wiped out that whole coverage of the tornadoes. And there were over 20 people killed in Tennessee through those tornadoes. Those were devastating tornadoes that they're still trying to recover from, on top of having to deal with COVID-19. Then on top of that, and what a lot of people didn't realize, there was a 5.7 magnitude earthquake that hit right outside of Salt Lake City that did quite a bit of damage and destroyed some hospital, did a lot of damage to hospitals. The COVID-19 call center was evacuated and it cannot be used. It had to be shut down and moved. So we've had two natural disasters on top of the worldwide pandemic of COVID-19. So disasters don't happen just one at a time. We've had several just within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. So for our audience that might be watching, whenever that may be, let's talk a little bit about what is disaster relief coaching and recovery coaching, obviously, and then give an example of one of the ones in the past that you've been able to help somebody with or help an organization with.
Sure. So disaster recovery coaching is when we're able to work with our clients. It's not relief coaching. It's not. So I've worked in both the relief and recovery. So when we talk about disaster relief, that's usually the immediate response of a disaster. So let's take, for example, the tornadoes that happened in Tennessee a few weeks ago. Right after that happened, the need was great for basic shelter, food, and water. And people went in to help with the basic need. Um, People are still in shock. They're still rummaging through what's left behind as far as their homes, their businesses. They're having to come to grips and through the shock of maybe losing a loved one or loved ones. And so that's disaster relief. When you come in and you help right at the moment of disaster to help stabilize the situation. Now, when we're talking about disaster recovery, what we're doing is we're helping clients who have, right about right now in Tennessee, when they've started to assess the damage, people have found some sort of shelter. They know where to get their food from. They're starting to settle down and they're starting to plan for, okay, what's next, right? So now that I know that my house is destroyed, I've got to figure out how do I rebuild my house. And I have to go through the insurance process and all those things. So that's where we as coaches can come in and start helping our clients understand that there is steps to get to the future, that there is hope, there is to set a vision of what it will be when they're able to get past all the red tape and all the things that go with the insurance and everything that's going to, and what is it going to look like when their house is rebuilt? What is it going to look like when they're back on track and getting back to whatever normal looks like? So that's the difference between disaster relief and disaster recovery.
So let's talk a little bit, because I think we've all had that event in our lives, maybe a death of a loved one or some kind of life change experience, whatever it may be, either natural disaster or just a byproduct of life. What do you tell someone? How do you come in and help somebody, or tell for our viewers here, what's one way you get people to get past that overwhelmed stage and the trauma stage? So let's real example right now, right? The COVID-19 outbreak, right? People are panic shopping. People are turning to false places for media for information, and it's not the right places. There's been a ton of information coming out where to look, like the World Health Organization, get real-time information. So people are business leaders, a lot of them will rush to decisions of layoffs and business decisions. So how do you get past that first stage of the overwhelming fatigue of disaster? And so what's one step that you would tell people to start with?
Well, John, that's a great word, using the word fatigue, because disaster fatigue is a real thing. It is something where, and long-term disasters, as you would, as this COVID-19 pandemic is considered a disaster. So declarations have been made, and really what a disaster is, something that is out of our control, that comes in and completely changes our life in that moment. So for instance, work has been shut down for a lot of people. Schools have been closed. Our lives have been disrupted. And so out of things that are not in our control, that is considered a disaster. And so as people are getting into understanding that now we're into week 2 of this, is something that could go on for another, week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we don't know.
Months, yeah.
And so the initial shock is where we are right now in our country is we're still processing. So we're still in that fear. We're still in the hoarding. I think is starting to subside a bit, but it's still a mentality of I need to make sure everything I have is protected. And so we're still kind of in that shock phase. So the first thing that we have to do is just listen to people. That people need to tell their stories. And sometimes it takes one time, and sometimes it takes 5 times for them to tell the same story, but they have to continue to tell their story because that's the way they're processing. And so we all need to be open to listening to each other and what they're going through. Some people are very, very fearful. Some people are using humor to process it. Mm-hmm. Some people are asking a lot of questions. Some people don't know what questions to ask. So everybody is processing differently. But so what we have to do, especially as coaches, is be open to listening to their stories just over and over again. We don't need to be asking a lot of questions. We just need to let them talk. That is a way that our natural brain processes what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so we just have to be opening to listen to each other. And then once people have accepted what is going on, then they're ready to say, okay, what's the next steps?
So let's talk about that next step for a second, because as we know, when you're fatigued by fear or anxiety, or if I just lost everything, I get that overwhelming sense when I have to clean my house. Which room do I start with? And even with our goals, even in positive manners, we want to focus in on how do we accomplish this big goal that we have. And, they say one step at a time. I love this John Wooden quote, and we shared this on our Facebook and our social media.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do.
Can do.
So don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. I love that for a lot of reasons, but in the middle of disaster, or even in our lives, there's a lot of things out of our control, like what you said. But what can we do? What we can control? So what would you say is, okay, now I've gotten past the shock, the trauma, to now I'm ready to move forward? Because if not, you're in urgency, and urgency is going to create you uh, that next step forward. So what would you say? Okay, how do I craft this vision and take this practical step forward? How do I move past that stage once I've come to terms with it?
Right. So the first thing you need to do is break down where you are at that moment, as far as how, just sitting down and saying, okay, on a scale from 1 to 10, where am I in my well-being? On a scale from 1 to 10, where am I in my finances? Right. So we do as coaches what we call the wheel of individual perspective. And we have the 6 categories. We have the financial, the spiritual, the well-being, the health, um, relationships, and career. Right. So, because I don't have the wheel in front of me, but we break it down. So the first thing we have to do is look at those different areas in our life and see where we are. You might have been laid off. Like today, I was out at a doctor's office, and there was a couple in there, and he needed to get his medications refilled. Well, they didn't have any money to pay for the doctor's copay because they both worked in a restaurant and they were both laid off, right? And
Yeah.
so this guy needed medication, but they could not get it refilled because they didn't have, they lost their job. And so in that moment in time, they were both standing there and they didn't know what to do next. And because their life has been dramatically changed in the last couple of weeks. So of course their finances have completely changed. So if you find yourself where all of a sudden your life has been drastically changed and you've come to terms with that, of okay, I've gotten through the initial, I've filed for unemployment, I know that I'm going to be getting a little bit of money. I don't know how long it's going to be, but okay, now what's my next step? Right? So we start to look at the next step. So what is it going to look like when I get my unemployment check? And what is it going to look like when I'm able to pay my bills? And what is it going to look like? And really start to focusing on those next steps, because what do we always say in coaching? Begin with the end in mind. And that includes life changes. So in that transition, we see the transition, but in the end, what do we want that transition to look like? And then
Yeah.
we focus on that.
Yeah, and I think that's where there seems to be, in my experience, two types of people when it comes to the end. Some people are really good at having this vision or this end goal in mind, but they have trouble implementing steps or creating steps to accomplish that or reach that end game or that goal. And then there's the other people who kind of know a good healthy direction to go, but they don't really have an end game in mind. They don't really have a vision. They're just kind of working. They're stuck in the grind. So like work, and I'm just working, I'm clocking in, clocking out. That's what I do. I don't really have a vision for what do I want to accomplish with my life, or what do I want to achieve. And then you have those visionaries who cast this mega vision of this thing or this thing that they want to accomplish, but they don't know how to get the right people or tools to make it happen. And then the ones that are super successful in their fields are the ones that know themselves and have the right people around them to make that
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Right.
So so in life coaching, we do the wheel: relationships, career, finances, health, spirituality, and well-being.
Yep.
And that's for any life coaching that we work with any client. But in disaster relief, it's the same categories. It's just a more focused on the here and now, right? Because there's things I have to have right now to survive. My well-being is important, but it might not, my emotional state is, as long as I'm still functioning healthy, right? It does matter, don't get me wrong, but it's like, okay, I have to find a place for my family to sleep tonight if I lost my house. Or in this case, I got to figure out how I'm going to get employment, right? It might be another month, right? So we're talking about this disaster relief. We're talking about, so just to recap what you said, get this end game in mind and prioritize and figure out the next step. What does that next step look like?
Right. Because when it comes to something at this magnitude, this scale, that affects not just a region of people or a group of people, it is affecting the entire world. So we're looking at this at a grander scope, and none of this is in our control, right? So at least if a natural disaster comes through, that might be out of our control. And moving forward, we might have a little bit more control of saying, okay, I need to call my insurance company, right? I need to do this. This is completely like they're telling people you have to stay in your homes. You cannot go to the beach. You cannot go to, you have to stand 6 feet away. So they're telling us exactly what needs to be done. And when we're so used to living in a society where we don't necessarily have as many rules as other countries do, and we tend to live our lives in one way, that all of a sudden overnight it's been switched. I mean, we went from this one day to the next. And so the whole, just trying to catch up with everything. In fact, I talked to a lady today who she said, I was working close to 12 hours a day. And she said, I was very involved with my job and I didn't have any clue. I didn't watch the news. I wasn't keeping up with everything. And then all of a sudden I wake up one day and I'm told they may have to shut us down. And I had no clue why until I turned on the news. And so for her life, she said, now I'm terrified. Mm-hmm. So because she didn't have time to catch up with what was going on.
Right.
She was kind of forced into this understanding of, okay, she was jolted, like someone jolted out of a bed with a tornado coming through and they have to run and hide. Mm-hmm. It was the same kind of jolt for her. And so she's just now catching up. And she told me, she said, I'm terrified. I don't know what to think. So she's still in that what we call the 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah.
Where the trauma is just now happening to her and she's trying to catch up. So we're all in this, going through this together, but everybody's moving at a different pace.
Yeah.
When it comes to feeling the jolt of the disaster.
Well, and that's true too. And that's like, there might be times where you need a licensed counselor, because we're not counselors, obviously, but you might need a licensed counselor to help you process that trauma. That might be a good first step, right? To, once you get out of that survival mode, is get into, I like to say there's different stages. You're in that survival mode, then you get into kind of the aftershock, or getting more into the new normal. And then you're getting back into development, getting back into the new future. How can I build that back up? So our economy, there's a great fear right now is, how is the startup going to happen if it's a couple weeks or a month or a couple months from now, when the industry kicks back in, and I start going back to work and things, how long, what's the gap going to be between the aftershock in the market? Is the economy going to crash? Is it going to boom? And so that's, and obviously that's what the government's dealing with, but I think to get real tangible and practical, that's what a lot of people are afraid of is, I'm okay for now in this disaster because I'm bunkered down and I already panic shopped and got all my stuff. But what about a month from now?
Right.
And so I know that you and I have talked about this, and a lot of coaches are really trying to get their heads wrapped around. This is where our industry as coaches is going to really need us to step up our game and really help our clients, because this is where people are going to need as much help as they can get, as in the ramp up stage.
Exactly. And that's where coaching can fit in, where we can be that sounding board. I was talking to someone yesterday who's been affected by all this and kind of coaching him. And her biggest thing that she told me, she's like, I'm just so overwhelmed right now and I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And so for her, it wasn't as much as a mental health issue as just, I don't know where to begin.
Right.
So I was wondering if you could work with me and help me find a starting point to looking ahead.
Yeah.
And that was a perfect example of what coaches can do at this time, is when people are feeling overwhelmed and not necessarily feeling, I mean, there is some anxiety, some natural anxiety that comes with that. But if you're feeling extremely anxious, that's where maybe mental health professionals can step in and help you. I do have a counseling background and I do have counseling education. I am not a licensed counselor,
Right.
but what I can help with some mindfulness. But for the most part, and I have been trained both by the Red Cross and Austin Disaster Relief Network and several other networks in psychological first aid. So
Yeah.
I have been trained in disaster trauma and first aid, and I've worked in those areas. But for the most part, as coaches, when disaster recovery coaches, to reach out is to say, hey, I am so overwhelmed right now, I don't even know where to begin. And that's where we can sit down with you and ask those questions and really help develop a game plan. Because what really has happened is that they have put the emergency brakes on the Titanic. So the Titanic's going along, right? And somebody pushed the emergency stop button, and it just, in the middle of the ocean, just everything just it slowly ramped down. And we're still kind of in that ramping down mode. But like you said, it's going to take a while to kick those engines back on and ramp it back up to get it going again.
Yeah. And
yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm encouraged too, because I stay up on the leadership world, and John Maxwell's been doing like a 3 or 4 day teleconference or video conference on LinkedIn, and but there's so much material right now. I just listened to a podcast also with Patrick Lencioni from the Table Group, popular author. Anyway, there's all these really good content out there about, even especially for leaders as well. What do I do? How do I lead? And right now, this is a time where leaders, especially if you have, and everyone's a leader. Leadership is influence. I mean, if it's with my family, with my friends, I even influence myself. I know that sounds weird, but we all have some level of influence. And so now's a time where we need to step up and really lead with authenticity and be, as Pat Lencioni said, exceedingly human. I love that. Be exceedingly human. Yeah. Care for people, call for people just like this, do video chat, do phone calls, those kind of things. But I think in coaches, just kind of wrapping this up a little bit, people, I feel like a lot of people I've talked to, they're just that same feeling. The word I've heard the most is overwhelmed. It's not so much fear and anxiety, although there's plenty of that out there as well. I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. So why don't we do this? Why don't we talk a little bit to kind of wrap up the video call? What would you say to our audience that needs to look ahead and figure out, how do I get less overwhelmed, and how do I start to visualize the future? How do I start to move past my thought process, past the present, into the future, even though it's limited?
Right. So the first thing is, I wanted to put this out there, that Rector Professional Coaching, I'm a certified disaster recovery coach. And like I said, I also have experience. I worked in Hurricane Katrina. I've worked in flood zones. I've worked in tornado disasters. I have worked so I have a background in working in disasters. like I said, I'm psychologically first aid trained and certified to the National Red Cross and other organizations. But the number one thing that I want to put out there is that I would like to offer free group coaching for just to get kicked off. So what that means is that if you are interested, leave us a message. You can send us an email. You can leave us a message on our website, through our email, through Facebook. And we meet just like this, basically, and we coach on the steps to take what next. And it's all about breaking it down, like we said, to those 6 areas. When we feel overwhelmed, it's hard to pick the area we need to go to first. And this gives us, this is a really good group for vocal processors, for people who really need to vocalize.
Like me.
And they need to sit there and say, hey, I just need to vocalize this and help me get my thoughts together. And that's what group coaching, and it's a good introduction to what coaching is. And there's not an obligation. You can get in here and you can all process that. And we can kind of get on the same page as saying, okay, what's the next steps? And that's what we can start doing as a recovery groups, is really start to feed into ideas and do think tanks of, okay, what are you doing that's working for you?
That's good. So you're not just doing a tool, but you're collaborating with people also
Correct.
in real-time disaster, going through the same thing that you are in a way. Right.
Exactly. And so it's a great way for everybody to collaborate and really throw out ideas, but for everybody to start setting their stepping stones to the next level. What's the next thing that we need to do? And then all work out together. Yeah. So in Rector Professional Coaching, we really want to help you do that. Absolutely. And so please reach out to us, because we would really love to talk to you. And we do it just like this, like this.
Yeah, and I'll say too that the one-on-one coaching is such a great benefit, and we have the pleasure as our job to help people in holistic ways. I mean, whether it's at work, whether it's at home with their family, whether health and wellness, whatever it is, we get the benefit of doing that. And now, I mean, what a great time. We're locked in our homes for 3 or 4 weeks, and the free session is great. And it doesn't have to be group, right? We can do a free session one-on-one as well.
Absolutely.
And just so people know how to do that, there's a really simple way. I'll share my screen so you guys can see it. Give me 1 second here. So if you go to our website, coachrector.com, you go up here to book now. And this is not a contract. This is just a simple, I'm interested. You can fill out your information here. If you are with a company, or you can do that. It doesn't have to. You can even prefer your coach or mark no preference. And you can mark any of this. If you're not sure what, just put other, or put a free 30-minute session. And we'd love to fill out this information and hit submit. And then either Mary or myself will get back to you. We'd love for you to reach out to us in this time, because that's what we do. And I have the pleasure of we both have the pleasure of working with either, stay-at-home parents or working professionals or leaders of big companies and organizations. We're really excited to work with the United States military. We had the pleasure of doing that, and love working with them as well. So,
well, and another resource, and these are for people that are not used to staying home and working, right? So we also have some leadership coaching. You do a great job with the leadership coaching, and vocational. We do vocational coaching as well, which we can help give you tools and tips of maybe organization of working from home. Because for a lot of people, that is a change of pace. There is a lot of people that work from home, but there are a lot of people that this is new to them. And they're not only having to work from home, that their kids are with them, and they've got the dog and the husband or the wife, and everybody's trying, and the kids are having to homeschool as well as you're trying to work. So there's a lot of distractions, which can lead to a lot of frustration. So we could even help coach you in some tools of how do you transmit this new normal of what we're going on for the next however long it's going to be, and what are some ways that we can get through that?
Absolutely. So, well, thanks for your time. Again, if you guys have any questions, we would love to answer them as soon as possible. You can email us at info@coachrector.com. Either of us or both of us will respond. You can message us on either LinkedIn or on our Facebook page. And again, that's Coach Rector. It's the easiest way to find us. That's our hashtag. But yeah, thanks for your time, Mom, Mary, and we
You're welcome
look forward
anytime.
we look forward to moving on, and hopefully this COVID-19 pandemic is wrapping up, or at least the scarier part. But I have a feeling we'll be here for at least another couple weeks to a month. So
Yeah.
thanks again for everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Bye.